transform our entire organization into a community of men and women. Men and never stop.
Particular ranking system.
We never stop.
Why is it
We
always
don't sleep.
bad?
We don't sleep.
I welcome each of you here in this summit, and I thank you for celebrating your essence with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Hero Ed TV. We continuously tread an unfamiliar terrain. 2020 has been a difficult balancing act for schools and their leaders. Hero Summit premieres a platform that allows tough yet inspiring conversations to transpire. This is an internet broadcast media that offers the finest exchange of ideas, interviews with heroes in education, and a common platform for thriving. The live conversations and interviews are hosted by yours truly. I happen to be the chair and founder of Hero, with the dynamic support from Mr. Nikhil Chopra, the President for International Partnerships, with the unbridled Hero members coming from the academe and different regions of the world. This afternoon, I am giving everyone a chance to meet Dr. To Sui Hin. He is the Professor Emeritus in Education at the University of Alberta in Canada and presently the President of the World Council for Curriculum and Instruction, or WCCI. He was formerly a distinguished professor of the University of Peace in Costa Rica, the Director of Multi-Faith Center at Griffith University, Australia, and a visiting professor in several countries. He has contributed to several international networks, including UNESCO, Peace Education Commission, Asia Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding, under the auspices of UNESCO and the World Council for Curriculum and Instruction, to which he was recently elected as president. The World Council for Curriculum and Instruction, or WCCI, is a transnational education organization committed to advancing the achievement of just, peace, and sustainable world. It was founded in Asilona, California, USA in 1970 at a conference of educators who shared a common vision of promoting international understanding. His involvement with the APCEIU include co-author of the feasibility report for establishing the APCEIU as a member of the advisory committee and the governing board from 2000 to 2019. In 2000, he was awarded and recognized as the UNESCO Peace Laureate. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon I am honored to present to you a wonderful presentation from Dr. Sui Hin. Let's welcome him.
Hello, welcome to the Hero Brain Share webinar series. This talk is held in collaboration with WCCI, or the World Council for Curriculum and Instruction, Philippine Chapter. I'm To Sui Hin, President of WCCI International, and my talk today focuses on the theme of Global Citizenship Education, or GCED, a transformative framework for the building of a peaceful, just, and sustainable world. If we look at the world today, I think we can see that it is full of contradictions and crises. On the one hand, there's been rapid economic growth over the last century or more, accelerated industrialization and urbanization, and of course, there is the spread of mass consumption and consumerism, especially for those who can afford the products. And life now is impacted seriously by advanced technologies of all forms and shape. And yet, despite such material and technological progress, unlimited economic growth, and boundless consumerism, we can say that humanity and planet Earth are still suffering from cycles of armed conflict, militarization and direct violence, pervasive violations of human rights, and discriminations of all forms and kinds, whether it be cultural, ethnic, or racism. There is deepening poverty and inequalities amidst all that rapid economic growth. There is environmental destruction and ecological crisis, of which climate change is the most recent and serious phenomenon. And we are finding a great loss of inner peace. Two major crises of conflicts have also emerged that have such a serious and severe impact on the well-being of humanity and our planet, namely the COVID-19 global pandemic, which has led to infections of many millions of peoples and over 400,000 deaths. Then there is also, originating within the United States, the Black Lives Matter protests, which resulted due to the murder of an unarmed black man due to excessive policing force. And of course, many cities in the US have seen the spread of these protests. And around the world, there have also been protests in solidarity with people of color in the United States. But there has also been a problem in many other societies as well. Racism, systemic racism due to the operations of police systems. Now, this crisis and contradictions reflect the challenges of transforming a culture of violence to a culture of peace. we can say that peace is actually multidimensional and complex. No longer can peace be said to be just the absence of wars. We also need to recognize the indispensable role of education in building a culture of peace. And hence, over the decades, there have been the emergence of diverse fields of transformative education. I just cite a few of these on these two slides here. It includes education for international understanding, peace education, disarmament education, human rights education, education for conflict resolution, values education, development education or education for global and local justice, intercultural or multicultural education, education for gender equality, and in recent years we have ESD, or education for sustainable development or futures. And most recently, we have seen the emergence of global citizenship education, or GCED. So GCED, or global citizenship education, you can say is the most recently advocated field of transformative education. But conceptually, it is really not totally new. And we have to recognize the interconnections and the complementarities among various fields of transformative education. Also, we can make a link to the UN-endorsed 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that was formulated in 2015. Now, SDG 4 refers to quality education. And within SDG 4, we have a specific target 4.7, which calls on all learners to acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including education for sustainable development, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace, and global citizenship. And hence GCD is actually a part of SDG 4 that needs to be attained by the year 2030. So why global citizenship education? Why is it important and essential today? First of all, we note that in many national educational systems did promote citizenship education or civics education, by which children grow up to be adults, and in the process, they learn to be national or global, local citizens who can fulfill various duties, roles, responsibilities, and quote-unquote loyalties. But this kind of national-based citizenship education does have limitations. For example, some governments may expect their citizens to be simply obedient citizens who do not question any policies of the government. Also, a national-based citizen education can lead to ultranationalism and all its negative consequences. And so we are saying that citizenship, which is based primarily on national identity, is quite insufficient, because today's world, nations are actually part of a global community bound together by very complex interrelationships. Nations are related now with increasing interdependence and interconnectedness. There is an exponential movement of peoples worldwide. And when we look at the global context of increased tensions and conflicts, all these global problems really require global solutions. Cannot be resolved by just one country alone. So, for example, climate change, weapons of mass destruction, global migration issues and problems, and as we've seen in COVID-19, global pandemics. Now, we acknowledge that growing interconnectedness and independence can help international intercultural understanding, and it does have some mutual benefits. But interdependence can also lead to increased distrust, tensions, and even conflicts. For example, foreign economic activities can lead to conflicts within the host country. Nation states can push their national and strategic interests, which can fuel conflicts and sometimes even wars. Migrants and refugees fleeing from wars and other situations of crisis, such as disasters, often face exclusions, which compound their suffering. Foreign tourists do bring a lot of funds and revenues to many countries, but they can also bring along insensitivities, cultural and social insensitivities. Foreign students number in their many thousands study around the world and outside their home countries. And although they're often welcomed, they can still face discriminations and exclusions. So what is a global citizen? We can say that global citizenship is really a form of citizenship beyond the nation state, beyond borders. It is a citizenship whereby the global citizen recognizes the interdependence and interconnectedness of all peoples and places. The global citizen has a deep sense of belonging to the global community and common humanity. A global citizen possesses 21st century competencies and skills, such as cross-cultural communication, problem solving, creativity, and so on. But a caveat is necessary. A global citizen cannot remain passive. A global citizen should be an active citizen. An active citizen who seeks to participate actively and fully in all dimensions of societal life. And hence we are saying that active global citizens would not be concerned just with their own rights and well-being. They would also be concerned about the rights and well-being of all other peoples, near or far. An effective global citizen is also simultaneously an active and effective local and national citizen. By using the term global citizen, we are not forgetting the important role of local and national citizenship. And so GCED educates citizens to be active in transforming not just global conflicts and problems, but also local and national conflicts and problems. Global citizen education towards a culture of peace, hence in summary, seeks to first develop citizens who have the values, the attitudes, the knowledge, capacities, and skills to actively and responsibly participate in all dimensions of societal development at local and national levels. Secondly, GCED promotes a critical consciousness understanding by global citizens of the root causes of multiple conflicts in all levels of life. And last but not least, global citizen education empowers active citizens to engage in personal and social action to build the more peaceful, just, compassionate, loving, respectful, and sustainable societies and world that humanity truly deserves. Turning now to a culture of peace, that concept. A culture of peace encompasses the resolution or transcendence of multiple forms and dimensions of conflicts, violence, and peacelessness in all levels of life. Hence, we would argue that global citizens have an ethical and spiritual responsibility to engage in individual and social action to build a holistic culture of peace in all levels of life, across local, national, international, and global spaces. So first of all, global citizens are active in dismantling the culture of war. That means they are concerned about overcoming wars and the cycles of violence and counter-violence. They seek to address the root causes of terrorism and violent extremism. Just using military might alone will not resolve the problem of terrorism without addressing the root causes. Active global citizens seek to abolish nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destructions. We would also eliminate or try to eliminate the arms trade, where trillions of precious resources spent on weapons that kill and maim people rather than be used for social needs such as food, housing, healthcare, education. Active global citizens will also try to resolve small wars, the physical violence in schools, the domestic violence in homes, and the like. Active global citizens will approach the so-called war on drugs and shift from militarized approaches to non-violent health and healing approaches. Global citizens also would try to overcome violence in media, the internet, video games, war toys, and even sports nowadays. And so some specific exemplars of global citizen education is dismantling culture of violence and wars include conflict resolution programs, peer mediation programs in schools, non-bullying programs, critical media literacy, converting war toys to peace toys, etc. Secondly, global citizens actively promote human rights and responsibilities. Global citizens acknowledge that while governments and leaders easily sign all kinds of human rights conventions, covenants, declarations, treaties, and the like, there's a big gap between promises and action, so that continually there are violations of all kinds of human rights worldwide. Global citizens are especially concerned in defending the rights of marginalized groups, whether it be women, children, ethnic cultural minorities, indigenous peoples, migrant workers, victims of trafficking, and diverse gender identities. Active global citizens would point to trade, aid, and globalization and say they should uphold human rights, not violate human rights. For those who are within school communities, there is work to be done in promoting and nurturing a culture of human rights within that very school community. Active global citizens would support international tribunals and the International Criminal Court as a way to prosecute dictators and authoritarian leaders who commit crimes against humanities, genocide, and so on. Active global citizens would promote social and cultural education to try and dismantle patriarchy that underpins gender inequality in the world. Next, global citizens would actively promote global and local justice. We well recognize the symptoms of world hunger and poverty in the world today. There are great inequalities between and within nations. But at the same time, GCED points out that there are actually alternative paradigms of development and globalization, a dominant paradigm and a critical paradigm. A dominant paradigm development creation would emphasize unlimited growth, maximizing profits, the role model of advanced industrialized countries, aid, trade, and foreign investments, and arguing that when countries are willing to integrate then their path towards economic growth and success will be assured. On the other hand, we have a critical paradigm of development and globalization. And this argues that poverty is actually rooted in the concept of structural violence, which refers to social and economic inequalities. This critical paradigm would argue that unlimited growth and benefits actually benefit elites more than marginalized peoples of the world. When agriculture is globalized, then local food sovereignty and security is actually undermined. When mineral resources are extracted, the benefits go more to local and foreign elites as well as the corporations. When there are export-oriented factories, then many global South workers are exploited. And so active global citizens looking at local and global injustices and justice argues that there needs to be authentic sustainability in the way economies are implemented. Active global citizens would personally reject a culture of global over-consumerism. And also to say orthodox indicators like gross national product are no longer relevant. We need to move to alternative indicators such as genuine progress, such as in the case of Bhutan, gross national happiness. And so global citizens are often involved in helping to promote grassroots people-centered poor initiatives for local and global justice. They strive to promote equity and social justice in school resources and services, and definitely equity in healthcare. As we have seen in the COVID-19 pandemic, the poor majorities of countries in the world suffer even more. So active global citizens would challenge the power and conduct of transnational corporations, would promote fair trade, the cancellation of debt, and solidarity with marginalized peoples. A fourth dimension of global citizenship calls on global citizens to promote cultural diversity and intercultural understanding. Yes, human history has witnessed numerous conflicts among peoples of different cultures, although there has also been cooperation. And when there are intercultural conflicts, we also need to understand the root causes. They could be economic, political, and social, not just because there are cultural differences. Active global citizens acknowledge that peoples do have respect and pride in their roots, their own cultural identity, but this must be based on a spirit of mutually respecting and exchanging with other cultures, being willing and open to learning from the wisdom of all civilizations and cultures. So GCED also then promotes multiculturalism, multicultural education, but this kind of multicultural education, intercultural education, has to go beyond festivals and the so-called 4Ds, the diet, the dress, dance, and the dialect. Why? Because we are not just one big happy family because of cultural diversity. Regrettably, there is a lot of racism and discrimination that divides cultures, that impacts on the well-being of different cultures. And as we've seen in the case of Black Lives Matters, there's not just personal racism, there's also institutional, structural, or systemic racism within the policing systems in many countries. So racism needs to be counted not just at the personal level, but also at the systemic level. So in schools, apart from promoting multicultural education, there has to be anti-racist and non-discrimination policies. We also need to take into account indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have been struggling for their rights to their cultural survival after a terrible period of colonial oppression and assimilation. And today, the dominant paradigm of and globalization continues to have a very negative impact on indigenous peoples, from mining and logging and other economic activities in their ancestral homelands. And so active global citizens need to show advocacy and solidarity for indigenous people's struggle for their survival. Also now, we are recognizing the role of religion and faith in conflicts, and importantly, in the building of a culture of peace. And so we have seen the growth of interfaith dialogue, and active global citizens need to be involved in interfaith dialogue. Interfaith dialogue allows different faiths to understand each other, which enhances respect and harmony. But at the same time, we acknowledge there will be differences and we respect differences in a critical manner. But we also need to find the common ground of values and principles, and based on those common ground, different religions and faiths are cooperating to build a peaceful, just, and harmonious world. And we have seen this in terms of climate change campaigns, in terms of social justice, in terms of gender equality, in terms of cultural discriminations, and so on. So interfaith dialogue is very important now for building a culture of peace. Fifthly, global citizens need to actively promote sustainable futures because there is an ecological crisis due to unsustainable growth and development paradigms. And this ecological crisis is causing tremendous suffering, not only to human beings, but also to other species. And the resulting impact of planetary destruction will rebound on the survival of humanity ourselves. And so active global society, we need to reduce ecological footprint. There's only one planet Earth. We all should not be living at a certain lifestyle that requires in reality 3, 4, 5 planets, which we don't have. And so active citizenship needs to promote a holistic paradigm of ecological security. We need to refuse over-consumerism. 3 hours alone will not be enough. We need to lobby government, business, and citizens for truly sustainable economies. And referring again to COVID-19 and other pandemics, we have to recognize there are now clear links between environmental destruction and the occurrence of diseases and the outbreaks of pandemic viruses. And so environmental education, or more fully, ESD, Education for Sustained Development, is critical for promoting GCED. We need the greening of homes, of schools, communities, nations, and the whole world. Last but not least, global citizens have to actively promote cultivating inner peace. We are seeing now that there is a loss of meaning, alienation, a loss of lack of spirituality. People are asking, more consumerism, will that actually bring more happiness? How do we heal the root causes of addictions? How do we overcome stresses, anxieties, ill health, and the growing rates of suicides in the world? How do we overcome hatreds and violence? And so GCD, in promoting inner peace, says we must find time for spiritual growth, for meditation and reflection. We need to find happiness in the quality of life, not the quantity. Certainly we need to avoid self-centered inner peace, because inner peace from a GCED perspective has to link with the building of outer peace. Looking now at GCED in the curriculum for our viewers who are involved in education, in schools and non-formal education institutions, we have to say that GCED is really lifelong learning. After schooling is over, even after university, GCED has to continue in a lifelong way. GCED needs to be mainstream in all levels and forms of education, and we need to promote linkages between formal, non-formal, and informal education. And nowadays, we have to bring in media and especially social media. Of course, GCED can be developed as a separate learning subject, but I think many GCED educators would say that optimal strategy is mainstreaming, infusion, integration of GCED across all learning areas. We need to foster more participatory, democratic, inquiry-based learning. We need to foster parental and youth empowerment and engagement as we conduct GCED. Now, GCED has to be based on critical pedagogical principles. It cannot be just teaching about content. It's also about teaching that content through pedagogy and processes which are consistent with the values and visions of GCED. We know that the current dominant banking, hierarchical, over-competitive model of education will not promote GCED in a holistic way. As UNESCO points out, education needs to promote not just cognitive and social emotional capacities, but also behavioral capacities. How do we educate so that learners say, I need to take action based on my understanding of conflict and building a peaceful world. So we say that global citizen education draws on principles and strategies of critical pedagogies, including holism, being holistic across all issues, being holistic across all levels of forms of schooling and education, dialogue, so that education is not just one way, with the teacher being the expert and the student being the recipient, passive recipient of knowledge, facts, and so on. There has to be a dialogical mode of education, and so very creative and participatory pedagogical processes are crucial in GCED. We recognize that education is never values-free, and GCED certainly promotes the formation of critical values that translate into action. And last but not least, GCED, like all other forms of transformative education, engages learners to take action through critical empowerment. Otherwise, it's just learning for academic sake. Finally, if I may say a few words about WCCI, or the World Council for Curriculum and Instruction. WCCI was founded in 1970 as a transnational educational organization committed to advancing the achievement of a just, peaceful, and sustainable world community. And WCCI has been accredited at the UN with special consultative status to ECOSOC, Economic and Social Commission of the UN. WCCI educators, through chapters and as individuals, have been promoting various dimensions of GCED through different activities. These include integration of GCED themes and issues in curriculum and pedagogies in various levels of formal education, as well as non-formal education programs. WCCI educators are engaged in educational research projects and scholarly and professional publications, including our International Journal for Curriculum and Instruction. WCCI hosts many international, regional, and local conferences, seminars, and professional development workshops for teachers and other educators on GCED. WCCI has been contributing to various UN activities, including the Commission of Women, Status Women, annual assemblies at the UN, and other commemoration of UN International Days, such as International Day of Peace, Human Rights Day, International Women's Day, and World Environmental Day, and so on. And the WCCI encourages all our members to participate in solidarity campaigns to promote the rights of marginalized peoples as a way of translating our ideas and commitment and values to building a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. In conclusion, I would like to say these few words. The journey towards a peaceful, compassionate, just, and sustainable world will continue to face many barriers and challenges. But nonetheless, together with other fields of transformative education, such as peace education, human rights education, intercultural education, education sustainable futures, and so on, Global Citizenship Education, or GCED, gives us, as I hope this talk has shown, a clear vision, some fruitful strategies, and paths of inspiration and hope. Thank you very much for listening to this talk. And I look forward to hearing from you of your ideas, of experiences, and your practices in GCED. Thank you. Take care. Regards.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swihin, for that wonderful presentation. We have the honor to appreciate his presentation during the Brain Share Summit, and we are sharing it here because we felt from Hero Ed TV that this is a wonderful subject matter to share, and it definitely will give us a lot of insights and inspiration as we are crafting, you know, changes, strategies in our curriculum or in our dynamics in the school, basically. The sharing personally had touched me because I am supporting green schooling. I am supporting conscious parenting, and I am definitely a big advocate for mindfulness education. So those are my takeaways from that wonderful presentation from Dr. Swihin. We are just fortunate that he had allowed us this presentation so that we can reflect further. And if you would like to connect with him through us, please feel free to email us back or to at least send us a message. We'll be very, very happy to discuss your practices along the discussion that had been presented. So ladies and gentlemen, the Hero Ed TV is here as a platform for thriving, and we'd like to hear back from you. You know our email address because you are not watching this if you haven't been receiving our invite. And I'm just very fortunate because our community is growing, and we have been hearing very wonderful feedback from the past episodes that we have presented. So thank you so much for all of your kind words. I'd like to end with this poem. I've shared this for the past episodes, but I'm sharing it again because I just felt that this is just the best way to punctuate this day, given the presentation shared to us by our dear Dr. Swihin. So watch this. Happy afternoon, everyone.
I thought I'd awaken to a world in mourning, heavy clouds crowding a society storming, but there's something different on this golden morning, something magical in the sunlight wide and warming. I see a dad with a stroller taking a jog across the street. A bright-eyed girl chases her dog. A grandma on a porch fingers her rosaries. She grins as her young neighbor brings her groceries. While we might feel small, separate, and all alone, or people have never been more closely tethered, the question isn't if we will weather this unknown, but how we will weather this unknown together. So on this meaningful morn, we mourn and we mend like lights. We can't be broken even when we bend. As one, we will defeat both despair and disease. We stand with healthcare heroes and all employees, with families, libraries, schools, waiters, artists, businesses, restaurants, and hospitals hit hardest. We ignite not in the lights, but in lack thereof. For it is in loss that we truly learn to love. In this chaos, we will discover clarity. In suffering, we must find solidarity. For it's our grief that gives us our gratitude, shows us how to find hope if we ever lose it. So ensure this ache wasn't endured in vain. Do not ignore the pain. Give it purpose. Use it. Read children's books, dance alone to DJ music. Know that this distance will make our hearts grow fonder. From a wave of woes, our world will emerge stronger. We'll observe how the burdens braved by humankind are also the moments that make us humans kind. Let every dawn find us courageous, brought closer, heeding the light before the fight is over. When this ends, we'll smile sweetly, finally seeing. In testing times, we became the best of beings.